Okay. Friends again. Hey Logan, how you doing?
Good.
Hey Max. We are on chapter 5. We got into it a little bit last week. We'll review a little bit, and then we'll continue on. Then after this chapter, we've got flight controls, which is really simple. That's a short chapter. And then after that, aircraft systems, again, pretty straightforward. Aircraft systems, we can get into. We're going to talk a little bit about some turbine aircraft and things like that, things that are really going to apply to you as far as getting your private pilot's license. Maybe later on when you go to the airlines or wherever you want to go, if you're going to fly a jet or something like that, then it's going to be more involved. But for now, we're going to focus on single engine general aviation planes. Anybody have any questions at all? Or everybody's doing good? Everybody had a chance to study a little bit? I'm sorry, what's that?
Honda.
Yeah, Vonda's going to be coming on March 2nd. I thought it was last week, and then something happened, and it was changed or whatever. Yeah, either I missed the email or didn't get it or something like that. So, and then we've got let's see, we've got 2 people coming up from the Bureau of Aeronautics in a couple of weeks. They're going to, I think, actually on the 2nd they'll be here. And today, Wes Hafer is going to be in here talking. He's an ex-military pilot, flew F-16s. He's got 2,600 hours F-16s. He's a first officer for American, so he's got airline experience, and he can answer some questions for you. He's got a whole presentation he's going to do. So the people that are coming up from the Bureau of Aeronautics, one of them is a former flight attendant, and she's also just a fantastic person. She's really involved in with high schools and getting programs set up. So she's been a great resource for me, but she's going to talk a little bit. The other person is the actual chief of the Bureau of Aeronautics in Wisconsin. So like the head of the FAA in Wisconsin. So he's responsible for making sure that airports like this operate efficiently and they get the funding they need to maintain the runways, keep the pilots happy and stuff like that. And so he'll be here to talk about careers and there as well. So, and I think let's see, I may have another United pilot coming in sometime in March, and I'm hoping to get an air traffic controller out of Madison or maybe Bullfield come up and talk to you guys. That is a career path you're considering anyway. And then the last one we'll have probably will be like a mechanic. I was hoping to have one of our prior graduates come in and talk with you guys. He's going to start his own maintenance shop, and he's but Oshkosh right now. I think he's did his 2 years, so he doesn't quite have his AMP yet. I think he's got to get some work time in from that. But anyway, he graduated and he was offered in less than a year of time. He was offered $120,000 a year job for maintenance stuff. So it's the aviation industry is definitely, we're hurting. We need talent. So if you guys are looking to get looking for a career in aviation, this is a good time to get into it. Airlines are looking to hire in various positions and stuff like that. So it's good thing. So anyway, hopefully those speakers will, they can answer. They're not going to answer everybody's questions, but they will definitely do their best. These are all really, skilled people, and they've got time in there. So, hi, Jocelyn. Very good. All right. I think we can get started. All right. 4 forces of flight. What are they? Okay, good. You got that. All right. So let's just start from the top of session 5. We'll just fly through the first part of it there. So obviously this is all aerodynamics that we're talking about today. Excuse me. So again, there's our four forces: thrust and drag, both and weight. One thing I didn't, maybe I didn't mention last time, is that in steady flight, these forces are balanced, so they're equal. So lift equals weight, thrust equals drag. And that means in any steady flight, not just flying straight and level like this. It means that, if you're in a climb, all those forces are in balance. So that means in this case, this seems kind of weird, but if you're climbing and the plane is in steady going up a flight path like this, right? All of those forces are equal. Okay. And the only way I can think of it is, you have to think a little bit about Newton. He said whenever you act upon a mass, there's always going to be an equal and opposite reaction, right? So if this plane, let's say this plane does not have any mass to it, it's like it has zero weight. So I'm trying to figure out how to say this here so you guys understand this. So if this is moving in this direction right here, and there's no forces changing that, it's just going to keep going that way. And that's, again, it gets back to this lift versus weight. A lot of times people think, oh, well, the lift increases in a climb and it's always increasing. It's not the case. That's an important concept, and it's easy to misunderstand that. So when you're in a constant climb or constant descent, or straight and level, flying straight and level, both the lift and the weight, the thrust and drag, cancel each other out. So if you have, let's say the aircraft weighs 1,000 pounds, the lift has to be 1,000 pounds to cancel out, whether it's climbing or descending. And the same with the thrust. If you've got 200 pounds of thrust moving this direction right here, you have to have 200 pounds of drag in order for that to maintain that constant, whether it's climbing or descending. And that's something that if you understand that, you're going to be able to get a lot more questions correct on the FAA exam. So it's just one of those things that it confuses a lot of students. Anyway, I thought I'd stress them just a little bit more in there. So, and if you have questions on it, definitely talk to me about it, because I try to explain all this stuff as best I can, but sometimes I could probably go into a little bit more. So, all right. So we talked here. Yeah, here's a good example right here. You've got an aircraft that's got, this aircraft could be flying in any flight path. It could be going up, let's say the flight path could be, going down like this right here. Again, if the lift is going to be equal to the weight, even though the aircraft is going down or up, it doesn't make a difference. So, and that's in constant flight, constant speed flight and a path there. Right. Yeah, and the way they worded in the book, this is on 5-2, the way they worded here, in steady flight, the sum of these opposing forces is always zero. There can be no unbalanced forces in steady straight flight based on Newton's third law, which again is that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So, right. And let's go to this one here. All right. What's opposite of flight path? What's that? Relative wind is always x opposite of the flight path. Again, important concept. You want to understand that. So if flight path, well, you guys tell me what's the flight path of this plane right here? Down. It's going down. So the flight path is there. Where's the relative wind? It's up like this. It makes sense when you think about it. Relative wind, they're talking about the wind hitting the plane itself. So when it's flying through the air like this, the wind that's hitting it is from here. It'd be the same if I was just running, at whatever, 10 miles an hour or something like that. If I'm running along, I feel a slight breeze against my face, right? That's relative wind because I'm producing forward motion. And the opposite effect of that is that air is hitting my face, so I have that relative wind in my face. Same with the plane, but it's always opposite of the flight path. So flight path is this way, relative wind is that way. If the flight path is this way, again, just the opposite there. So, and that's important because how do we calculate the angle of attack? Does anybody know what the
Angle of
okay? So actually, what you could say, that's really close. I can simplify it for you. That's correct. But instead of saying angle of the chord, just say it's the chord line versus the flight path. Okay, so let's view the simulator here so we can see this. So here's our plane. So I backed it up a little bit. We can see our flight path right here. This is our flight path line right there. Okay, and if I just this right here, what I'm going to try to do is draw a line here from the leading edge to the trailing edge. Let's go up right there. Yeah, it's probably a little further back. So this plane is actually going pretty fast right now. So you can't see that right now because I've got to pause. But so this right here is our angle of attack right here. It's the chord line, the difference between the chord line, angular difference, distance between the chord line and the flight path right there to there. Okay. Another way to look at it is let's do this. This angle right there. That's your angle of attack. And again, chord line, which is from the tip of the leading edge of the wing to the trailing edge of the leading wing. And I'm just extending this line out so we can get it across the flight path. So, and you could draw the flight path. I could do the same thing up here. I could just draw the flight path up here. Oftentimes, when you see representations of angle of attack, they oftentimes will show the flight path up here like this. You know, from where the wing root is right here. So, and we can see there's a slight angle there. Can you see that right there? So again, that's our angle of attack, and it's important to understand that concept for a number of reasons. So we've talked a little bit about angle of attack. Is there another type of angle of attack that we should be aware of? Critical angle of attack. What is the critical? Anybody else know what the critical angle of attack is?
that be where you stall.
Yeah, it's where basically the wing stops producing sufficient lift to keep you at that altitude. It's that process of let's go over here. So if here's the relative wind comes across, hits the wing, goes up and around like that. If the flight path of this aircraft was down like this, you'd have wind going up like this, hitting it, and then what would happen is it would produce these eddies, these burbles like that, because it wants to stick to the surface of the wing itself, and if it can't stick to that, it starts peeling off, and it generates these what we call eddies in the wing itself. So the net result is that the wind, it's not an efficient flow of air over the top. You lose lift, and so the wing starts to stall. It doesn't stall all at once. Well, at least in most aircraft, it's not going to stall all at once. The general aviation airplanes, they're designed to always, stall from the. Let's go here. They typically stall at the wing root first, so you'll start to see, like little burbles here. They'll start, creating it way before the wingtip stalls. Does anybody know why that might be? Why they would design it so that it would stall closer to the wing roots right around here as opposed to further out? Possibly, yeah. So then still control it. Absolutely, that's it right there. So look at the ailerons. Here's an aileron right here, and here's an aileron right here. And if we start, if they had the whole wing stall at the same time, let's say all stall at the same time, you wouldn't have any authority. We call it authority. That means that when we control our ailerons or whatever, that means we've got the plane is going to respond the way we think it's going to respond. But if the stall occurred at the wing tips like this right here, these ailerons are not going to be very effective because it's just air is just bubbling over the top of them. It's not flowing that's when we get control. When air flows over a control surface and we deflect that control surface, it's going to cause the plane to change, you know, pitch, or in this case roll. So what they do, they create what they call washout. You don't have to know that term, but essentially what washout is it's kind of a twist in the wing as it goes, you know, further out, and it affects the you know, how the aircraft behaves. General aviation aircraft, you know, generally speaking, are going to be easier for a person to fly. So that's why we don't train in like fighter jets. When we get, it would be nice, but you know, they're obviously they're a lot more trained in like you know, aerobatic aircraft. When you first get your pilot's license, you want to train in something that's got, you know, is going to be a little bit easier to handle, and something that's not going to, you know, get you into trouble if you know, stall. So that's why most general aviation aircrafts are designed that way, again, to, you know, protect the pilot, the student pilot. That's true of a lot of general aviation planes, Pipers, as well as the Piper low wings and things like this, or the Cessnas that we're seeing here. So, okay. So angle of attack, critical angle of attack. All right. So that critical angle of attack typically is going to be around anywhere from 15 to 18 degrees. And then the plane is just going to start, you know, wallowing when you get close to it. And then we can call it bushing, or sometimes they call it buffeting. You feel like a buffet in the plane. That's one thing, again, a simulator just can't do. It can't simulate what the forces are, what you feel in the plane when you're actually, you know, flying it. A simulator is great for doing this kind of stuff, but if you really want to learn how to fly, you have to fly in real plane. Because the aircraft, believe it or not, it actually talks to you. You have to learn how to listen to it. Once you know, establish that communications with it, you become a better pilot. You understand what it's going to do, how it's going to behave, and things like that. So, so let's do this. So I've got this plane set up right now. It's on autopilot, so I can actually fly this. I can actually just do the outside views here. So, oops. There we go. Okay. So this is our flight path in the back. What I'm going to do, I'm going to slow down our the aircraft. I'm just right now we're at a constant altitude, and I'm going to go ahead and bring back the throttle. We're not changing our altitude at all. We're staying level, right? We're staying at this altitude. Before I do that, can anybody guess what's going to happen to the plane? Is it going to pitch down? Is it going to pitch up as we slow down? What is it going to do? It have to maintain. What's that? It's going to pitch down. You say, okay, if I slow the rudder, right? I'm sorry, the throttle. If I bring that back way back, we got some people that say it's going to pitch down. Okay, to maintain the altitude, right? I've got the autopilot on, so it's locked at our altitude. Okay, or what else could it do? It could just stay level, like just stay like this, right? What else can it do? So it could either the nose could point down like this, it could stay level like this, or it could pitch up like this. Like, keep in mind that this plane is on autopilot, and if I bring back that throttle, it's going to try to stay at that altitude. What is this going to do? It's going to pitch up. Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens here. All right, so let's turn it back on again. All right, so we can see our. I think I'm going to bring our throttle back. Actually, let me do this here and then just go inside the plane. So there's our airspeed right there. You can see that we're about 110 right now. So I'm just going to slow it down here. Starting to slow down. Again, we shouldn't change. Our altimeter should stay at this 1400, which is really low, by the way. Never do this in real life. But, okay. So let's go outside here. Okay, what has happened to our plane? Yeah, it pitched up a little bit. And you can see that if I pause it here and I draw our line here, There's our flight path line right there. That's the directional line the path the plane is flying in. I draw this right here. That is a much steeper angle than what we were flying at before. Why is it doing that? You have to think of lift, right? So the plane. Now let's back up a second. So aircraft weighs 2,000 pounds, right? We're producing prior to this, we were producing 2,000 pounds of lift. We're still producing 2,000 pounds of lift right here because it's not descending, right? It's it's staying at that altitude. So again, all those forces have to be in balance. If you have 2,000 pounds of weight and you want to stay at the altitude, you have to have 2,000 pounds of lift. So let's actually take a look at this back up here. So this will actually, you'll be able to see it a little bit more. So watch that angle of attack there. See how it changes there? Can you see that? So that's where we're traveling right now. We're at this speed right here. We're traveling at 110 knots. Now we move along here, and now we're at maybe 60, 70 knots or something like that. So the plane has not changed altitude. What produces lift? Propeller, thrust, right? Thrust helps produce lift, right? It gets the plane going through the air. So really what's happening there, right, is the faster you go, the more lift the plane is going to produce, right? The slower you go, right, the less lift the plane is going to produce, unless we do what with the flight controls? Pitch up. Or what is that doing when we pitch up with the angle of attack? What's that? Deflecting, yeah. What is it doing to the angle of attack? Increasing the angle of attack. So what that means for you is you can control the aircraft with obviously the pitch, the control yoke. You can adjust the angle of attack, which is going to increase the amount of lift. So that's what you're seeing right here. You're in this case the control yoke. For actually look inside. Let's do this thing. Show you this one. So let's back up again. All right, so let's get back. All right, so there we're traveling at 110 knots. Watch the control yoke here. Let's see if we can see it there. I don't know if we'll notice it, but so I'm going to go ahead and go forward here, and you should see the control yoke move out. Yeah, there we go. You see the control yoke moving there ever so slightly there. So it's increasing the angle of attack. So that's maintaining our balance between weight and lift. So our lift through that whole maneuver I just did there. The lift was always, if the aircraft weighs 2,000 pounds, the lift was 2,000 pounds. Okay, does that all make sense? We learned a little bit about lift when the plane is flying through the air. We all remember Bernoulli's law, I hope, or principle there. The faster aircraft or the faster fluid moves across something, whenever that faster moves, the lower the pressure. So let's take a look at the two things that we have here. So let's talk first off about really just to kind of refresh our memories on that. So Bernoulli said the faster fluid moves, the lower the pressure. Right here we've got faster moving fluid on the top of the wing. The air is the fluid, right? And then you've got relatively slower air moving on the bottom side. And that's because, again, you've got that. Does anybody know what this curved line is on the top? Camber, yes, good. So that's the camber of the wing there. It causes the air on the top to travel further, which reduces increases the distance that it has to go, which causes the fluid to travel faster, which and again causes the fluid to produce a lower pressure. So you've got relatively high pressure down here and relatively low pressure up here, and that's producing a lift at high speeds. When you start getting down to slower speeds, you need to produce more lift. But unfortunately, Bernoulli starts petering out at that point, and then we have to rely more on Newton. So let's take a look at what Newton does here. So let's go here. So again, this Bernoulli's doing a lot of work here at this point. The plane's flying really fast. We're doing about 110 knots. It's coming along really fast. Now we go a lot faster, and the angle of attack increasing there, and now we're starting to see a lot of Newton. So again, Bernoulli on this side right here. Now we're starting to see a lot of Newton. So what Newton is doing in this case, Newton's law is the air is hitting the bottom portion of the wing and deflecting downward. So you have downwash right here. So that's producing a lot more downwash when you're flying, and it still produces downwash when the plane is flying. When it's flying straight in the air, you'll just notice that it's not as much. You can see that when the air hits this, it's more the downwash isn't going to be as intense. But that's where Bernoulli is kind of picking up there. Does that all make sense? It's sometimes a tough concept to understand. If you get this stuff and you take the test, I guarantee you'll have no problem with it. There's a lot to it, but that's probably the biggest thing right there is you've got two factors working there, Bernoulli and Newton. And it really depends on the angle of attack or which one is doing the most on there. And Bernoulli is definitely doing something here as well. When you look at, again, if you look at Newton's law, the faster fluid moves, the lower the pressure. Well, you've got the air across the top here going like this. It bends it down. We've got that downwash, and then we have Newton, producing for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So this air hits this wing, gets deflected down like that. So you've got these forces now, all this downwash, and that's what produces the lift to keep the plane up in the air. And that's how we control it with the control yoke. We're constantly, adjusting that. So let's see here. Sure, I've got that set up. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about here is, let's see what's going on. Okay, so we talked flight path, relative, and we understand that. Thrust and drag, I think we understand those two components. And then if you're not quite familiar with how this works, is what you could do is you could break. Have you guys, anybody taken like physics classes? They got physics. Okay, so they talk about vectors in there, right? You guys have gotten into vectors. So we talk about vectors a lot in aviation. So here, this right here, this lift, this is a vector right here. This is the total lift acting on the aircraft itself right there. This is the total weight. The weight is always perpendicular to the earth because that's where we get weight from the gravity, right? So there is what's called a rearward component of weight, and like we can think of rearward component of weight as when the plane goes into a climb, there's always that force that's trying to drag it down to the earth. So in this case, like if the plane's flying straight level like this, the rearward component of lift or weight is always there. Okay. If I angle it like this, we're going to a climb like this, the rearward component of weight is there's actually a little bit that is pointing this way. You break it up into two different components. So that's what this diagram is showing you right here, is that there's different components. You've got your total weight of the aircraft, but you have the load, I should say. But yeah, it's a component of weight opposed to lift. That's what this is right here. And then this is the weight of the aircraft. So the same with lift. They don't show it here. Let's see, maybe they've got another one here that shows this. You can actually break it up into vectors up here as well. You've got your vertical component of lift, and you've got the rearward component of lift, which is going to let's do this. Here. There's your vertical component of lift right there, and then you also have a rearward component of lift or drag, induced drag right there. And again, this gets back to, we talked about it a little bit last week about induced drag. Do you guys remember what that is? Induced drag is? It has, yeah, anytime an aircraft produces lift, you're going to have some, there's always drag with it. And if you increase your angle of attack, you've got your lift going this way, but some of the lift is actually pointing backwards. That's your induced drag. So it makes sense. The airplane is going to slow down if I fly along like this at a constant power setting and altitude, and I start pitching my nose up to maintain the altitude itself. There's that component of lift that's pointing back. That's what we call induced drag. And again, it's induced because the pilot is controlling the aircraft. They're inducing it because they want to produce your higher angle of attack and want to produce more lift away, right? Okay. Does that kind of make sense? So we'll get into more of this stuff here in a second too. So it's okay. Let's see here. Okay, so you guys got talked about the thrust, the lift, flight path. You guys have got that down. Satisfied with that. I'm going to show you this next thing. On the page 5-4, they've got a formula for lift, and it looks really complicated when you look at it. Let's just break it down. So the lift formula. Let's see if I can do this here. So it's lift equals coefficient of lift times the air density, which is then times velocity squared. That's an important point right there. We'll get into that in a second. Times the shape of the wing, or the surface area of the wing there, divided by 2. So that's our lift formula. And you could find this, remember that book I mentioned to you guys about the aerodynamics for naval aviators? If you really want to get into formulas and how aeronautics are just basically aeronautical engineering, that's a great book to get into. It's got some advanced stuff in it, way more than what I want to teach, but if you're interested in it. But let's break this formula down. So again, L stands for lift, and that's in pounds. It can be whatever we want it to be, but let's just say it's pounds right here. So every airfoil has a certain amount, or what we call a coefficient of lift. So an airfoil that's shaped like this, for instance, is going to have a higher coefficient of lift, higher coefficient of lift than a wing that's designed like this. Does that make sense? You're going to produce more lift at slower speeds, particularly with this one right here, than you are with this one. So if they're both these wing cross, this is just a cross section of the wing itself. Again, if I were to chop this wing off right here, that you'd see that cross section of the wing there. That's what we're looking at. So this particular wing right here has a much higher coefficient of lift. So that's going to plug in right here. So that's how that variable works. The P right here, that is, and it's not P, it's something else. Well, no, it's a Greek character, and I don't know I should know what that is. Your dad probably knows. So, but in any case, that's air density. So what affects air density? What did we learn that?
Temperature.
Temperature. Okay. What else? Altitude. Yeah. Humidity. Yeah. Okay. Temperature, humidity, right? Okay. And pressure. All those things are going to affect the density of the air. Okay. So that makes sense. The higher the airplane goes, the less lift it's going to produce, or the colder it gets, the air is denser, right? It's going to produce more lift. I can see this every day. Every time I go up flying in the wintertime, when I take off, I use a much less runway. I also can climb a lot faster for a number of reasons. It's not just the air is denser. The engine runs better because it's cooler. The air is cooler. The engine breathes just like we do with our lungs. It needs dense air to operate. So the denser the air, the more power it produces. We've all heard the term intercoolers. You guys heard of that? Some cars, the term intercooler. So what an intercooler does is it chills down the air before it goes into an engine, like race car engines, for instance, have intercoolers. And that's because they want to cram as much oxygen, or basically air, into that engine. And by cooling it, they wind up getting that air density, increasing the air density. Okay, so that's our air density. Okay, so we got coefficient of lift, we got air density. The V, that's our velocity, but it's squared. Okay, times velocity squared, and then we've got the surface area of the wing. So the if you have a much larger surface area for the wing and a higher coefficient of lift, you're going to produce, again, more lift. But the one factor here that's important to understand is the speed of the aircraft. So as the speed increases, it's going to exponentially increase that the lift. But there's also something that counters that, as it is in everything in life. So we're going to get into that in a second or two. So does that make sense? Okay. So you've got those four variables right there. There's a lot more to this formula, but this right here is the basic formula for it. And again, you don't have to know this for the test. I would highly recommend you kind of dive into that and understand it. But the big takeaway here is that as the velocity of the aircraft increases, and we saw this when we did our flight here, we can prove it right here just by, let's clear this off here. We saw that as we decreased our airspeed, we had to compensate with a higher angle of attack. So here we are flying along at 110 miles an hour. Now we're starting to lose airspeed. We've got to compensate for that, so we have to produce more lift here. Finally wind up with a high angle of attack here because we need to keep producing that. That's that formula in action. So we'll look at this again. Well, formula, but if that formula is describing the situation there. So one thing we don't see is the angle of attack there. The formula itself. So okay. All right, so we've gone through this high level speed, flight path. Again, you have that down. Here are a couple of planes that are aircraft that use lift differently. They vector thrust. So that's a Harrier jet, and it's got. Has anybody ever seen one of these fly at all before? They're incredibly loud, aren't they? They make so much noise. But yeah, they can just hover in the air. And then this, I believe, is Osprey. Thank you. Yes. So and that's these big engines right here. They actually rotate the propellers forward and aft, so they can adjust the plane itself. So that's thrust vectoring essentially. We don't do that obviously with general aviation aircraft. All right.
Take on the Ospreys because they're a bunch of fatalities.
Yeah, they had some problems with them. I think and there's a number of them that have crashed. I think over the years. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really followed that much. So I know that it's a problem. I think they're working on a replacement for it. So it's an incredibly efficient aircraft. I mean, you could load a lot of troops in there or whatever and get land in a field someplace if you needed to. And you get in there fast, unlike a helicopter. Helicopters are limited by that. You've got the rotor swinging around like this, right? They can only go so fast. Helicopters can't go much more than 250 knots, just because of the fact that the rotor is going so fast when it's swinging around like this and it's going in this direction. The rotor that's swinging over here is traveling through the air much faster on this side as opposed to this one right here. And it's a good concept to understand. So we're going to get into that too as well with the props in the plane. But as it swings through there, it goes too fast, and then it limits the speed of it. So the Osprey, that's going to have a huge advantage over it. All right, so let's look at some charts here. So this is a coefficient of lift and drag at various angles of attack. And again, I just showed you this in the simulator itself. So we started the plane out here at a lower angle of attack. This is the low angle of attack. And we started, obviously the angle of attack increased to maybe like 10% or something like that, or 12%. Watch what happens here. So the coefficient of drag, which is not the same as coefficient of lift, it's in a sense, it's kind of proportional to it, relational to it. So you've got your coefficient of drag right here. As the angle of attack increases, your coefficient of drag increases. Right there, you can see that. And it gets to a point where it just goes to infinite. Does anybody know what that point might be? This one. What would, as a pilot, if I reached that point in my plane, what would I expect the plane to be doing? Stalling. Yeah, it would be stalling. Because the coefficient of drag is just too high, and that's because the plane is at such a high angle of attack. It's hit that critical angle of attack. It can't produce any more lift to counter that coefficient of drag, right? That drag. So it's going to start to settle. Okay. Coefficient of lift maximum. That's the maximum lift that we can get out of the aircraft. That's essentially where it's going to, yeah, that is the closest to stall we can get without losing any altitude, the plane. So if you've got full power, and you're just able to maintain the altitude that you're at, that's the CL max, or the coefficient of lift max. That's that right there. We go into this. There's other charts you're going to see. I'm going to throw a ton at you. This one can be a little confusing, but again, think of, again, the primary elements here are the lift and drag. Just, what is the lift of the aircraft, what's the drag of the aircraft, and keep in mind that drag refers to not just, all the different components that are producing drag on the aircraft. It's that induced drag that the pilot is inducing on the aircraft. As they increase their angle of attack, they're increasing their induced drag, and that's what we're seeing here. Okay. Let's go to this one right here. Again, we just saw this fast, slow. So again, fast, the airplane is moving, in a straight line. Well, these are both moving in straight lines. It's just that the pitch in this aircraft is much lower than it is in this one right here. We can see that the airplane is angled up. All right, so the maximum lift is going to be at that critical angle of attack right here. Right there, they talk about 16 degrees. And after that, the wings stall, and the plane is not able to maintain the altitude that you're at. So the important thing to understand too about stalls is, again, it's not, they aren't violent maneuvers in most general aviation airplanes. You'll feel kind of a buffeting, and the nose will kind of fall down like this. You'll start losing altitude. If you want to maintain, I've done this before at 5,000 feet. My instructor forced me to do this. We took the plane up to 5,000 feet, and he basically locked the control yoke, and he said, you need to control the aircraft with just the rudders. And essentially what we did was we stalled the plane. It was a little Cessna 152. We stalled it, and the plane just floated down like a leaf, like this, the whole way down. And it was a really weird sensation. I'll do it with you guys if you want to try it sometime. It's a lot of fun. But I'll never forget that experience. But it helped clarify, for me anyway, how that what's happening in a stall. Because you can still, to a certain degree, you can still kind of control it. There is, when you stall an airplane, it's not like the whole wing stalls. If the whole wing stalled, the plane would just literally fall, right? I mean, there's no, if you had no airflow over the wings, the plane is just not going to support itself, so it's just going to fall. That's not what happens in a stall. In most cases, it's just going to start, floating down like this. In some cases, the nose is going to pitch down. Most of the time, if you just let the airplane do what it wants to do, the nose is going to want to pitch down and recover from the stall on its own. So, right, coefficient of lift, yeah. So yeah, you can only produce so much lift with any airfoil. Let's go here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about drag. Right, so So this is on page 5-6. There are, up here I've got a couple of them. There's two main types of drag. There's parasitic drag and induced drag. Excuse me. So parasitic drag has to do with everything that on the plane that's really not related to producing lift. So when you look at this plane, is there something on it when you look at it? Is there anything on there that you see that just doesn't look like it would produce lift?
Gear.
The gear, yeah, definitely. That's going to produce parasitic drag. It's you've got all that stuff hanging out. What about if we get really close to the plane? Is there other things that we can see? How about antennas? Antennas produce drag. Rivet lines produce drag. What's that? Probably is going to produce a certain amount of drag, especially if you bring the throttle way back. It's going to produce a lot of induced drag at that point, right? Mm-hmm. All right, and then what else? Yeah, lights that stick out. You'll see it a lot of the older aircraft. The lights weren't built into the wings. The newer aircraft, they're all built into the wings, so they cut down on the drag. But a lot of the older aircraft, they had these huge things that came out. I think it was DC-3 that had this. I think it was a DC-3 that had a huge. It was like a spotlight that swung out from underneath the wing itself, and that produced a lot of drag. And it'd be enough you could actually feel it in the plane. There'd be a little bit of a sense that there's a little bit of yaw or something like that that comes out. So that's parasitic drag. It's just basically all those things that aren't natively designed to produce lift on the aircraft. The fuselage itself, believe it or not, is designed to produce lift. And it actually does. If you look at the shape of it, it kind of looks like our Bernoulli, camber. It's got a kind of a camber. There's the fuselage right there. See how it slopes back like that? It's actually designed to produce a little bit of lift. You get a flat body right here. The air travels faster over the top, so it's going to have a little more downwash here. It's going to produce a little more lift there. So that's part of the production of lift. Whereas the landing gear is just pure drag. It's just, in this case, we call it parasitic drag. So rivet lines, bugs, and things like that, that's going to produce a certain amount of parasitic drag. Believe it or not, people laugh at me about saying this, but when I wax my plane, I do feel a difference in the performance of it. I get higher speed, especially after it's been through a summer, a lot of flying in the bugs and stuff like that, and it's coating everything. Cleaning it up really does help a lot. So, all right, let's see. Let's go here. So that's parasitic drag there, and again, that's just one of many. So the thing about parasitic drag is it's not too noticeable at slow speeds. So if you're flying along, like this right here at, let's say, 60 knots, the plane's top speed is 120 knots, right? Parasitic drag isn't that big of a factor. Like the rivet lines, the rivets and stuff like that, they're not going to produce that much drag. But the faster the plane goes, the more those things are going to affect that parasitic drag. It's going to increase the drag on the aircraft, okay, the parasitic drag. So again, smaller things like antennas, at slow speed, you really wouldn't notice that, an antenna sticking out. But at high speed, that antenna, whatever it is, BUR antenna, comm antenna, it's going to produce a certain amount of drag, and it's going to slow that aircraft down. Okay. And again, so parasitic drag goes up as the aircraft goes faster, and so much so that at some point the plane just can't go any faster with the induced drag and the parasitic drag. Well, actually, with parasitic drag, the plane just can't overcome the parasitic drag. The induced drag actually at higher airspeeds drops down to almost zero, almost nothing, because of the way let's go back here. So here we're going fast. This is where we have a low induced drag right here. And if I go faster now, at some point here, the pilot's going to start pitching up. There we go. Okay, you can see the wing there increasing, the angle of attack increasing. Now we've got a high induced drag there. Now there's a lot more wind hitting the relative wind hitting this underside of the wings there. It's hitting the bottom of the elevator here, the horizontal stabilizer, also the bottom of the aircraft. getting hit, and you're getting lots of induced drag, as opposed to flying much faster back here. Our induced drag is almost nothing. That's because Bernoulli is doing most of the lift there, right? Okay. So again, Bernoulli right here is producing the lift. This aircraft weighs 2,000 pounds. Bernoulli is doing a lot of the lifting there. At this point, Newton is producing a lot of the lift. But because of that, all that air hitting and striking it and producing downwash, it's producing a higher induced drag. Right? Does that make sense? All right, let's go here. There's induced drag. So this is the classic chart for a graph for induced drag. So down here we've got the airspeed on this axis right here, and induced drag on this axis. As the slower the aircraft goes, so like it's just sitting there on the ground, obviously there's no induced drag. When the aircraft starts flying, we get to about 60, 70 miles an hour. We're going to rotate. There's a high induced drag. We got to increase that angle of attack to rotate and actually climb up away from the airport, right? So there's a high induced drag at that point. And then as we climb up and we get to our cruise altitude, that induced drag is going to start to go down lower and lower, and eventually the faster we go, the lower that induced drag is going to be. So we've got, in this case, we've got very fast low angle attack, just like we said in the sim there. We're able to see that. So these concepts, again, these are important concepts to understand, again, to answer those questions. If you can memorize this stuff, but I guarantee you it's going to be a lot easier if you understand it. So if you do have questions on it, please talk to me about it. I try to do my best to explain this stuff, but sometimes I don't always, get it across to everybody. So if you need something you just don't quite understand, let me know. So what we can do now is we can actually overlay the induced drag over, well, in this case, this is induced drag versus parasitic drag. So we've got our total drag on this axis right here. We've got our airspeed on this axis right here. So if we're going faster, we can see that induced drag is going to be less of a problem as we go hit our speed. So in the 172 that we were just flying, our airspeed was really fast right here. We were about 110 knots. We're at 110 knots, high airspeed up here. But we can see when we look at the parasitic drag, however, when we're flying at 110 knots, that it's really high. Again, all of those antennas, the gear, all that stuff increases the drag on the aircraft the faster we go. So that's what you're seeing there in this graph right here. And then conversely, when we slow the aircraft down, so let's go to the aircraft running really slow here, we can now see that the induced drag is now starting to play a factor. So this right here obviously would be our stall speed right there. So plane is stalling. We're probably right here in that aircraft, somewhere in that area there. This is what we call a regional reverse command, by the way. We'll get where that's a whole other section to get into. So we've got a high level of total drag right here. This is when you basically add both the induced drag and the parasitic drag graphs together. This is the curve you're going to get right there. So there's two different forms of that drag, the parasitic drag and the induced drag, and they're going to both have an impact on the performance of the aircraft, how it behaves. Some other ones here. Yeah, this just talks about types of parasitic drag you're going to have. Obviously, if you have a fairing or something like that, does everybody know what a fairing is? A fairing is oftentimes on like tricycle gear aircraft, any aircraft that has fixed gear where the gear just doesn't stay down, it doesn't retract or anything like that. What they'll do is they'll put covers over the wheels the top part of the wheel, so that when the aircraft is flying through the air, instead of the air seeing just a round shape like this, it actually sees kind of a shape like this. I think we've got one here. Let's see if they've got I think I just saw one. Yeah, well, here, let's just use this right here. So these are fairings right here. These little, they're just essentially boots around the wheels. The wheel sticks out the bottom. What that does is it cuts down on the drag, the parasitic drag. It makes it easier for the aircraft to fly through the air. So, and they're just showing the relationship between, a flat plate, for instance. Those eddies that I was talking about are produced on the wings as well when we do stall. This is what's happening to the airflow. It's hitting that ball, it comes around, it sticks on the surface of the front of it, but then as soon as it hits the back, it starts, producing these little swirls here, and that's essentially creating drag, is what it's doing. So if this is our tire and we put it in a fairing like here, like this right here, it cuts it down a little bit more, and then this is even better because we're kind of guiding that air around the tire so that it's not producing those eddies. There's a small amount of it of turbulence there, but it's not much. It's definitely better than something like this. That's producing lots of drag. Okay, that's going to be, again, contributing to our overall parasitic drag of the aircraft the faster we go. And it makes sense when you think about it. I mean, if the faster this fluid is moving, the more turbulent that's going to be, right? This is going to start out, if this air or liquid, if you were to do this in liquid, water or something like that, when the liquid hits this, it's going to go around and maybe it's going to swirl a couple times, then it'll kind of smooth out again. But if you make it go faster, it's going to keep extending this turbulent area here, and eventually that whole turbulent area creates lots of drag. So the faster we go, again, the more drag it's going to produce. And in this case, we're adjusting that here. We're putting that fairing around that, whatever it is. You'll see a lot of antennas will have fairings on them. Oftentimes, they just look like a shark fin. A lot of planes, if you walk up to a plane, just take a look at the outside of it, you'll see these like little vertical pieces of plastic sticking up, or on the bottom sometimes. They are designed to cut down on that parasitic drag. That's what they have. Some of the older aircraft that you see these days that are still flying out there, they didn't really care about drag that much. So parasitic drag, they were happy if they got over 100 miles an hour on the plane. So you don't see a lot of those little, fairings and things that reduce the parasitic drag. So this is another type of fairing right here. The wing root, that can create what we call form drag. So this is another type. So we've got parasitic drag. Parasitic drag is actually broken up into 3 different areas. So induced drag is just induced drag, but parasitic drag is actually, there's 3 different types of it. There's form drag, which is the shape of there's drag that's produced by the shape of certain parts of the aircraft. In this case, at the wing root, they added a fairing in here. Normally, if this was, I don't know if you can kind of make this out here, but there's like a shaped piece of aluminum right here that helps cut down on the form drag right here. What happens with form drag is when the wind hits it, it starts creating little eddies around that area. So you'd actually see, as this plane is flying, you're going to see eddies produced right here. It's just going to create what we call form drag. That's an example of form drag. Here. Okay, you can actually see over here. There's an antenna right there, and that one is kind of got a shape to it there, so it's coming down a little bit. This antenna right back here, I don't know if you can see that. Oops. That's just a circular antenna that says no drag reducing, capabilities at all. This one at least has got, it's angled back a little bit. The antenna's angled back, and it's got kind of a shape. I don't know if you can kind of make that out there, but it actually has a kind of a fin coming off of it there. So that's helping to reduce the parasitic drag. So again, form drag has to do with the shape of the aircraft, the airfoil, and various intersections of the wing, the connection between the landing gear and the wing or the fuselage. That's going to produce form drag. So that's what form drag is. So there's also skin friction drag, which we've talked about. That's going to be your rivet lines. It's going to be the if you've got an old airplane, sometimes the paint it's kind of this flaky look to it. It almost looks like a powder sometimes. That produces a tremendous amount of drag, parasitic drag, that is, at high speeds. At low speeds, again, it's not going to do that much. But at high speed, it definitely is going to slow the aircraft down. Okay. And then interference drag, let's see, we talked about that. Let's see. Oh yeah, actually, I got that mixed up though. Interference drag is going to be the intersections between the wing and the fuselage and various, like the gear attaching. That I'm sorry, that is interference drag. Form drag just is essentially the form, any shape on the aircraft that is not going to produce, I guess, a sufficient lift or any lift on it. So it could be just the underbelly of the aircraft that produces it, the shape of it. That's going to produce a certain amount of drag there. Generally speaking, when it comes to the FAA test, they really only want you to know the two different types of drag. You have to understand there's parasitic drag and there's induced drag. Parasitic drag, they don't really go into much. They just, they talk about parasitic drag. They don't go into details on it. It's a good idea to know the three different forms of parasitic drag. That's form drag, and interference drag, and skin drag. But you're not going to see much on the test on here. So, okay. Let's see. All right. So wingtip vortices. This is a fun one. And unfortunately, I can't simulate this in the plane, but I'll try to show you what I've got here. So let's go back here. So high speed. Has anybody ever seen the movie Die Hard? You saw the movie Die Hard? Anybody else seen the movie Die Hard? It was Bruce Willis. This is an old movie. It was in the 90s, I think it came out. So there's a scene in it at the very end of the movie. I don't know if you remember this, but Bruce Willis is running down the runway, and there's a huge jet landing, right behind him. They filmed this live, right? So they had a real jet landing right beside him. They had a film crew out there, and they had all the smoke blowing across the runway. It was at night, and it was really, brilliant scene. But as he's running, the plane passes over the top of him, right? And you see this circular form. Do you remember seeing that? Do you remember seeing the circular form of the gas there? Do you remember that? That's a wingtip vortice, and you actually saw it in the movie. So if you ever watched that movie, at the very end of it, look for Bruce Willis running along the runway, and you'll see the swirl of the smoke there, and then you'll see him fall. So that, I thought, was a really good illustration of how powerful wingtip vortices are. So this is something we talk about, what a wingtip vortice is. So let's get back to our Bernoulli, and let's talk a little bit about that. So here, let's put this up right here. So as this plane is flying along, what's happening is you've got the low pressure on the top of the wing, right? And you've got high pressure on the bottom of the wing. So what happens is, as air flows across there, it gets to the end, and the air wants to go to where the low pressure is. Well, the low pressure is on the top, so the air that's on the bottom tries to escape. And what happens is that the air kind of slowly flows out this way. It hits that wingtip, and it immediately wants to go to the top, and it produces these spirals like this, like that. So if I were to switch over to here and draw in another dimension, or another way here, the spirals would look like this. It would go like this. Like that. When you're flying straight and level and really fast, these are relatively small spirals. Those vortices are relatively small. When you're flying at low speed and maintaining your altitude, or taking off or something like that, those vortices can be very strong. Now, on a small plane, again, we're only displacing a couple thousand pounds, so it's not going to produce a lot of vortices. But if you, let's say you're landing behind a 737 or 747, or you're taking off after one of those large airplanes, those are displacing, tens of thousands, or not hundreds of thousands of pounds, right? And what are they displacing when they take off? The air. Yeah, they're displacing the air. So you've got this huge thing. Have you ever, anybody been on taking a boat ride or something like that? And they watch the wake of the aircraft or the boat itself. That's essentially what it is in a plane. It's you're producing a wake in the aircraft. The danger with the aircraft is we can't see that. You just have to be aware that there's vortices of aircraft, various aircraft. Whether it be a helicopter, a larger aircraft, or whatever, they are strong enough to rip a small plane like this apart. If you fly into a wingtip vortice on a 757 or a 747, it literally will rip the plane apart. So that's why it's important for you to know what a wingtip vortice is. It also plays a part in, we talk a little more about coming in for landing. We're going to talk a little more about wingtip vortices, but they're strongest when the aircraft is flying its slowest and it's heavy. And they talk about it here. They talk about the wingtip vortices, but this is what you're essentially going to see when, if you were to actually see it. And that's why I love that movie so much, because at the end you actually see not just the wingtip vortices from the smoke and everything, but you see how powerful those vortices are to just blow him over. The actor didn't even know that this was going to happen, and when it hit him, he wasn't acting. It just knocked him over as he's running down this runway, and it was like very similar to the illustration in 5-7. You'll see in the movie it's very similar to that. You'll actually see these vortices with these swirls and everything, and then it eventually hits him, and then he wipes out. So it's at the very end of the movie if you do want to take a look at it. I thought it was just a little way to illustrate that. So let's take another look at it. So if we do it this way, if we were to look at the vortices again, the air as it goes from the high pressure air on the bottom of the wing hits the end of this wing, it springs out and pops over the top of it and creates these swirls there. Okay. And again, this is a small aircraft. If this was a 747, they would be much stronger because they're displacing a lot more air, and it comes off of both wings. So what they do is, and you have to think about it, so high pressure to low pressure, air is going to try to flow up to the top to the low pressure, right? And because there's low pressure on the inside of this, it produces the swirls on the inside. Let me just do it one more time here. So again, if you look at it from behind, the air is going to, as you're flying, air is going to wrap up around because it must get to that low pressure. It's just going to keep creating a spiral like this there. And in both wings, it produces those vortices. Those are wingtip vortices. Okay. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Why don't we take a quick break here for you guys, and then in a few minutes we'll hold up here, and then we'll have Mr. Haber come in.
Joe, I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
How can I schedule because like an O flight with you?
With I'm sorry. With,
Like an orientation flight.
oh,
Like,
yeah. Maybe send me an email, and then
Gotcha.
I'll. For me, it's just it's about scheduling.
Yeah.
I have to make sure I've got the time to do it. So probably on a weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you have like time off from school during the week, afternoons are sometimes okay for me.
yeah. This Wednesday I don't have school.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
if you just wanted to keep that in mind, but I'll definitely email you.
Yeah, if you could, yeah, for sure, definitely do that,
okay.
and we'll see if we can get something scheduled for you. And
Cool.
Get you up, and we'll do this for everybody in the class. We'll
Yeah.
just go through the thing. So I just haven't had a chance to just get it scheduled. So
Yeah, you're fine.
but we'll be doing a bunch of those. Then Did Fonda get you signed up for the Young Eagles?
Yeah,
She did. Okay.
Yep.
So you should have your access to the Sporties program then.
Mhm.
At some point. Okay, good, good. All right. She's going to do that, I think, on March 2nd for everybody else then too. So, but yeah, perfect. Sounds good. Oh, seriously? It's like mind control or something like that.
Um,
That's crazy. What is it? Who makes it?
um, EAE.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's something.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, stuff is just going so fast. Okay. Okay, so as far as avoiding weight, let's get back to weight turbulence, or those wingtip vortices. They're essentially the same thing. But so to avoid weight turbulence, there's a couple general rules. First off, if you're generally when we fly a small plane to a larger airport, for instance, there's usually going to be air traffic control there. They'll give you, wake, avoidance alerts and things like that. Typically, you want to wait like 2 minutes prior to takeoff after a plane is taken off in front of you. So let's say this is a 737 and you're taxiing in right behind it. They're going to have you wait 2 minutes to take off. So it takes a while for those wingtip vortices, those wing turbulence to kind of dissipate. So the normal path for that, back here. So this is our big jet right here. They sink at about 500 to 1,000 feet per minute. Um, and we want to be away from that vortex because they're still strong even after a couple miles. If you're right behind it, yet if you're right behind the aircraft, it could break up the plane itself. But it's enough if you're flying close enough to it where it could actually roll the aircraft. Depending on it, if you're flying a really small plane, it's going to have more of an impact on that than it would be a larger. But it's still, we want to stay away from those things as best we can. Yes, Kate.
You can do great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They'll have weight turbulence avoidance. They'll give you an issue of weight turbulence avoidance alert or something like that. Or caution, they'll just say caution weight turbulence or something like that. But then it's typically around the larger airports where they're flying, larger aircraft. If you had two small planes flying behind one another, it's again because they're not displacing as much weight, the weight turbulence is going to be as intense. So it's not going to be as critical there. Still, you want to watch out for it because again, the what produces those vortices is again that high angle of attack. A heavy aircraft is going to displace more air, right? And it's going to produce higher or more intense vortices at a greater wake, just like a large boat. If I was in a canoe and I was canoed behind a cruise ship, yeah, it would be a rough ride, behind it. So same thing with a plane. You're traveling through that fluid. You want to avoid areas that could cause problems. So a hovering helicopter, you don't think about that. You've got all this downwash from kind of a conical, got a circle around that aircraft that's producing these downwash, these vortices all the way around it. That can cause problems, especially on landing. So we have a lot of Blackhawks that fly up from Madison that land at Baraboo, and you want to be careful when you land behind one of those. If they're practicing, they'll come in and land. Always, you want to be safe that you don't run into one of their roller wash there, so it's very, very bad. So one thing about wingtip vortices too, that's a benefit for pilots, is that as a large jet or plane, whatever, aircraft comes in to land, the minute they touch down on the ground, those wingtip vortices pretty much stop. So, you know, if you're going to land, let's say behind a large jet, when you come in, you're going to want to land after they touch down, at the point that they touch down. So if they touch down, let's say the first quarter of the runway, you want to land after they touch down, because then you won't have the wingtip vortices. They won't be, you know, there's just really not that much. They're not producing anything because they're not. What's producing lift at that point is what? What produces lift when an aircraft is on the ground? The ground, yeah, exactly. So it's not producing any lift, and that's what's causing the wingtip vortices, the lift of the wings right there. Because the aircraft is on the ground, there's no lift that's being produced by the wings. That's what's producing the wingtip vortices. Okay, right. So let's talk about. Let's see. Just take a look at here. And we got to talk about stability. Most of them done here. This one. And they go into wing shapes here. We'll touch on that a little bit, but forces in the term, we do have to talk about that. So, okay, let's talk about ground effect. That's on page 5-11. So one of the things that you'll notice as a pilot, when you come in, as you get within, or as you come into land, you're going to find that the aircraft wants to stay up in the air, especially when it gets within about a wing's length of the runway itself. Okay, so if you take your aircraft like here, like that, if it's 36 feet, see it like this. The plane, as it comes in within about 36 feet of the runway, and probably a little bit closer maybe, you'll notice that the plane, for some reason, just wants to keep flying. That's what we call ground effect. And it's what's causing it is the ground there is not, it's resisting the air that's the downwash from the aircraft itself as it gets closer to the ground. Let's see if I can draw this here. Maybe the gavel. There we go. Yeah, this is a good illustration of it. So up in the air, you've got this plane is flying along. This is maybe like well over a wing's span above the ground right here. This aircraft, you can see the flow of the air around the aircraft, and it flows down nice and smooth like this. That's that downwash we were talking about. Again, we've got a lot of Newton work in here, where it's deflecting that air down, and the kind of downwash, it's pushing it down. Almost like, think of this almost as like a spring right here, this part of it right here. When the aircraft gets close to the ground, we get into what's called ground effect. And again, ground effect is considered usually about the span of the wing itself, close to the ground. So, it would be like here, this aircraft, for instance, if my hand was the runway, and this plane right here, got the wings there. If it's within that distance there, this plane right here would be feeling ground effect. It would be in that mode where it's producing a little bit more lift. So what's happening is you've got this downwash. There's actually less drag that's occurring here. You don't have as much drag because as the air hits the ground here, think of it as kind of like a spring. When this spring touches the ground back here, it kind of keeps the aircraft up in the air, so it's going to float. And this gets pilots all the time, including myself. You come in a little fast, and what happens is you stay in that ground effect, and the plane just wants to stay up there about 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet above the ground, and it'll just stay there for forever. if you until you lose the airspeed. You bleed it off. You want to, slowly keep that aircraft. What you don't want to do is point the nose of the airplane back at the ground and force it onto the ground, because then you'll get into a situation where, if let's say, I want to get down on the ground. If you point down like this and you still have a lot of airspeed, when that nose hits, it's going to cause the front end of the airplane to kind of bounce up like this, and then we get into a really bad. It's called a porpoising oscillation. Essentially, the plane pitches up like this. You force it down again, it hits the nose. The reaction is that the plane wants to go back up again, and you keep doing that. What you want to do when you're coming in for landing is come in like this. Let's say here's a runway. Come in like this, and you want to bleed off your speed and basically get to a point where you're really close to stall, if not stalling the plane right onto the runway. Because then the wings are not supporting the aircraft, the wheels are, and then the plane stays on the runway. I've had it happen to me once before I got into a porpoising situation. I was able to work out of it. It was pretty scary. I've had a lot of people I've seen that have gone through it, and it's so much so. Some of them, the porpoising moment gets so intense that it actually hits the nose and destroys the prop. So if you get into one of those, the best thing to do is just to go around, just give it full power, take off. So once you get into that, again, don't even mess around with it. And that's what I tell all my students now. If you get into it, that happened years ago when I was a student, I got into that situation. So, but I learned a lot from it back then. Again, you get into one porpoising moment, the best thing to do is to just go around, come back, and stabilize your approach, make sure you're coming in at the right speed. So ground effect is, again, we have to be aware of it because it is going to affect how the plane flies close to the ground. It's not going to just come in and we're not going to be able to just come in like this and land. Usually it's, you hit that ground effect. What you want to do again is just fly in and then just hold that nose off the ground. And you may have to keep applying back pressure to keep it off, the wheels off the main. You want to keep that nose up in the front there so that you land in your mains, and then let it slowly settle out on the ground. And it's because that ground effect again is because the downwash of the plane is hitting that pavement there. It's reducing the drag on the aircraft, so it produces essentially more lift. So again, if we have a 2,000-pound plane, we really want the lift to be much less than the 2,000 pounds, right? We want it, we want the plane to come down. So we have to do something to reduce the weight of the aircraft. Well, we have to reduce the lift of the aircraft, right? So we have 2,000 pounds of lift. Maybe we want like 1,800 pounds. We don't know what that number is. We're going to run the cockpit. All we're doing is just adjusting the throttle and the control yoke. So you just want to make sure though that when you come in again, that you're aware of that ground effect, and you'll experience that first time you fly. You'll see it, and you'll see it several times after that too. I mean, that's just the way aircraft operate there with that ground effect. So the other thing too to consider with that, so you got this downwash. You also have those wingtip vortices. Remember we were just talking about those. So let's see if I can kind of do a diagram like this. Let's try this. Yeah. Let's try this. Yeah, it's not going to do it very well for me. But remember we were talking about the wingtip vortices where they came and swirled back like that. We've got a high angle of attack right here. This is our chord line of the aircraft. Here's our flight path right here. I've got a relatively high angle of attack right here, and it's producing those vortices. Well, the thing about the wingtip vortices is they start to dampen the closer you get to the ground. As they come back here, you can see they're not as intense as they are up in the air at the same angle of attack. So this one right here is flying the same flight path right here, same angle of attack. This is going to be producing much larger vortices up here as opposed to this one down here. It's so because of that, wingtip vortices are drag, right? So because of the reduced strength of those vortices as you get close to the ground, you're going to have less drag back there as well. So it's kind of a combination of things that are causing this ground effect. The thing that you have to be aware of is that the plane is going to operate a little differently in ground effect than it would in regular flight. Okay. This right here. Yeah, they talk about this. We'll get into this, I think, later on. Let me just introduce one last concept, and then I'm going to turn it over to Wes here. So let's go to our plane, and what we're going to do is talk about some of the forces in the turn. Let's do this. Actually, let's just do this. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is switch over to our so switch this right here. All right. So what I'm going to do, watch the outside of the plane. See if I can adjust our height. It's roughly what our head would be looking at right there. All right. So I have to first off, yeah. You guys hear that? What was that? Stall warning. Yeah. Okay. Last demonstration here. So, all right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to try to fly straight and level right here, and I'm actually going to bank the aircraft. I'm going to pause it a couple times so you can see this. So what I want you to do is look at the attitude indicator right here. So this is basically a reflection of the horizon. It's the artificial horizon. It's just like the regular horizon. So you can see how it matches the horizon on the windshield or the windshield there. So what I'm going to do here now is bank the aircraft here. And I'm going to get it to go into hopefully constant bank here. So that's a steep bank right there. That's right here. Let's pause it. Okay. So let's look at some of the forces that are in play here. So I'm going to switch out to circular mode. All right. Yes. All right. So we're in a level turn right now. So the plane is flying like this. Can anybody guess what would happen if I just turned the control yoke like this? Do you think the plane would turn? Why not?
Because I don't know how to describe it.
Okay, well, we'll get into the yes. Okay, so what Trey is talking about here is we basically bank the aircraft like that, right? We haven't done anything else. We haven't changed the pitch or anything. Okay, so keep in mind, like in a car, when we turn, there's resistance in the wheels, and so because of that, the wheels grip the ground and they turn. But in a plane, there's nothing that is, once we just bank it like this, there's nothing that is forcing the plane. There's nothing to grip against to get it to turn like this. All it's going to do when we bank it like this, it may turn a little bit that way, but for the most part, the plane is going to go like this. If I do nothing else with any of the other controls, the plane will turn like this, and a moment or so later, it'll start descending. Now, why is that? Less lift, right. So that the vertical component of lift is gone. Whereas actually, it's not gone, it's much less. So there's our vertical component of lift as we're flying straight like this, right? You got that vertical component of lift going up like that. We go over here, the vertical component of lift, or that lift that's producing the total lift, I should say, is pointing in that direction. So we lose the lift that's counteracting the weight, and so the plane starts descending. So what we want to do is if we want to go and do a level turn, what do we want to do with our control yoke, our controls there? We bank like this, pull back on the control yoke. And what does that do? It's going to pitch the plane up, but it's not going to pitch it up like this. It's going to pitch it into the turn, which what it's doing is it's causing more lift into the turn. So we're going to have a turn like this. Has anybody ever done a steep turn at all in a real plane? What did it feel like? Did you feel anything with your hands?
Yeah, so when I discovered I didn't do it, then he asked if I wanted to see what was thinking.
Yeah.
I said yes. I was still a little bit scared.
Yeah.
It was a weird feeling.
Did your hands, did he have you lift up your arms?
Yeah.
And what do they feel like?
It felt like it was weird.
They felt light?
Well, no, so when we were in the steep
Yep.
turn, I'm gonna be honest. So I was, but it's hard to describe the feeling. We also experienced turbulence.
Yeah, that makes it tough. What happens in most cases, straight,
I've kind of experienced.
Have you?
I've been in. I don't know if you actually did a steep turn. I can't remember,
Mhm.
but I think I can. I've been on quite a few like roller coasters and stuff, and I'll have a very similar feeling whenever you take a really tight turn.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's like it's almost like having gravity push you that way.
Yes.
It's almost
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if all of a sudden we flip this whole building upside on its side.
Yeah. It's what's happening there is you're feeling centrifugal forces or G forces in the turns. So what I always have my students do to illustrate it is we go into a steep turn. I'll do the turn. All you have to do is raise your arms. And if your arms weigh, 8, 9, 10 pounds, they're going to feel in a steep turn, they're going to feel like twice that weight. And you can feel it. When you lift up your arm, it feels really heavy. And you start getting you sink in the seat, you feel heavier, because essentially that's that load factor and the G force that's forcing into your seat. What's happening there is we've got all these forces here. And I think at this point, we're going to take a break. And we're going to finish this up, the rest of this up. I want you to kind of study a little bit about this for next week. We're not going to spend much time on the rest of this thing. I think we did a good job, covered everything. You guys are getting this stuff. I'm really impressed. But we'll go over the actual forces in a turn on there. But just that's one of the things you want to be aware of. I just want to get that across. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this stuff here. And we'll have Mr. Hafer come in and speak to you guys. So, yes, it is. Sorry about that. So, okay.
How's everybody doing? Where's everybody from? Ellsberg, Woosok, Pittsburgh.
I just
Everyone,
Sorry
yeah,
about
I'll
that.
step on that. Let's see here. Are you gonna look camera Anderson?
Yeah, I have to have all that stuff set up there. So, and it should just connect up to that if it doesn't all. So for all of you that don't know, Mr. Hafer is a former F-16 pilot, former retired lieutenant colonel. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. Out of Madison, he also flies for American Airlines, first officer there. He got lots of flying experience. Started flying when he was 17. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll go over all that.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, there you guys go.
I think it. There we go. Okay. Awesome. Cool. All right. Everybody's here because they're excited about aviation, right? Yeah. All right. I know it's a lot to digest, and some of you guys might not have the same opportunities to talk to people. So I'm mainly here to answer questions today, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey and then your journey. And any other questions you have, I don't care if it's related to induced drag, right? We'll talk about that. Hey, what do you think? Think there's a little bit of induced drag on there, right? So yeah, there's a lot of G forces, right, causing induced drag on the airframe. So the vortices coming off. You guys just learned about that today. Is there any parasitic drag on the airplane? What do you think? Like what? What's causing parasitic drag on the airplane right now? Missiles. That's right. Everything hanging on the outside, right? That isn't part of the airframe, right? The missiles, these bombs, right? These are bombs. No, they're not. They're fuel tanks, right? Okay. Anybody asking that airships? Okay, that's me. Hey, another thing we can just talk about quick since we're talking about this. What do you think about this? Why does the nose of the F-16 look like it's pointing down, or the fuel tanks look like they point down at like 5 to 7 degrees from the wing? I'm sorry, what? Exactly, right? Because if you look at this wing, does it look like it's got much camber in it? Almost everything with fighter aircraft, especially the F-16, is done with angle of attack, right? So it's just a lot of thrust with angle of attack. So when it goes through the air, it's just about 3 to 7 degrees nose high, okay? An angle of attack through the air. So the nose is actually pointing straight through the air. So on their ground, it looks like they're pointing down. But through the air, it's pointing level. And all this stuff going through the air, all the parasitic drag stuff out there, is traveling directly relative to the wind stream. Cool. All right. Here's what we're going to talk about quick. We got about a half hour. That's a lot of time. Okay, we'll talk about some of this stuff, and then and then I'm hoping to have a lot of questions from you guys. Okay, whatever that may be, feel free. All right. Okay, we'll talk about my story, different paths in aviation, right? Whether that be enthusiasts getting into commercial aviation or the military or government aviation. Okay, and then learning in aviation. All right, perspective, attitude, funding, and then questions. All right. All right. All right. When I was 17 years old, not too far from here at the Nillsville Airport. You guys know where Marshfield, Nillsville is? Any of that? An hour north of here. I went down to the airport, having wanted to fly all my life, and I asked the guy who owned the FBO if he could give me a job or whatever I could do to be around airplanes, just so I could learn. And he did. So when I was 17 years old, I was mowing lawns on the side of the airport and went out and taking pictures and catching a little extra flight instruction on the side. So I got my private when I was 17. I didn't have something as nice as this, a formal school. I had to sit down with my flight instructor, who may or may not have time while he's changing spark plugs on the side, to give me a little bit of education. Needless to say, I didn't know much about induced drag or any of those things back then. All those concepts were something you had to dig deeper into. Okay, so you guys are getting a great education here. All right. From there, I did get into the Naval Academy. Went to the Naval Academy, ended up having an unfortunate accident the first year. Left the Naval Academy, went to college at La Crosse. Okay, and while I was at La Crosse, I ran into an Air Force fighter pilot at an air show. So I was looking again. I was going to go back into the Marine Corps. And he told me about Air Force pilot training and some of the different avenues to get in. And so then from there, I got hired and accepted to go to Air Force pilot training again. Went to Air Force pilot training. From there, I've did 21 years, just retired last fall. Okay, about 3,000 hours in the fighters. Okay, I've flown majority of my time in the F-16. I've got one flight in the F-15, and probably about 200-300 hours in the T-38. All right, I got 700 combat hours. Been deployed 5 times to the Middle East. All right, and then I ended as a squadron director of operations. So I was in charge of all the pilots in Madison and all of our flying in the last year there. Okay. So what have I done? What's the big thing there? Is I hired young men like you to go off the pilot training. Okay. So I know exactly what we're looking for. And right now I also sit on the I just got accepted into the hiring program at American Airlines. There's a team of other pilots at American Airlines that do the interviews and go out and network and talk to other people. And so I can also speak to what we're looking for in the commercial aviation sector with the majors. Okay. All right. From there, about 5 years ago, towards the end of my aviation time at Madison, I went off to American Airlines, got hired there, and then went back on a military leave of absence. But I've been back flying the line there for about a year now. Okay. There's the F-16. Oddly enough, this picture was taken from a Cessna 172. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So here's some concepts you can take from today. So this is what a picture of one of our air sovereignty alert jets. So we have down in Madison, at least we did. Now Duluth has that mission down there, but we're in the conversion of the F-35. These are live missiles. How can we tell that? You guys know? Anybody? Just odd trivia. Okay. See the yellow bands? So if you ever see an aircraft, they got blue bands on them, they're just inert. Okay, dummy. They're there for weight and balance to mimic the induced drag of the airplane or the parasitic drag of the airplane. So we get, when we're out there fighting, maneuvering, it gives the same type of feel. Okay, we call those CATM. Those are live. Okay, so that is we go out and train with Civil Air Patrol. Okay, that's an auxiliary part of the Air Force of civilian people that do kind of a search and rescue mission and some other things for the Air Force. Anyway, they provide what we call a target of opportunity for us, basically to mimic what happens if somebody was trying to do something bad using a 172. Okay, so look at the angle of attack here. This isn't a picture this is no kidding framed completely straight up. Okay, so that's the angle of attack on the airplane. Full military power, and you can see these leading edge flaps are digging in, right? Because it's trying to give as much as it can, and even then, we probably still have 100 knots overtake on the 172, trying to fly as slow as we can with this thing. So probably going by at about 250 knots. Okay, that's about as slow as this thing will fly through the air at that speed with that configuration. All right, that's what I fly now. Airbus 319 to 321. It's a little bit different. I just thought of it at the end. I was going to grab some pictures of the cockpits that were a little different. Just to show you, a lot more room for activities in here. Okay, get up, move about, grab a sandwich, go to the bathroom. So, for all that. Okay, passenger aviation. So it's fine no matter what you want to do in aviation. Okay, there's really three groups I've kind of put things into. Your enthusiast, okay, your people that want to do things for hire, so your commercial aviation, and then people that want to serve their country and be in the military. Okay, so enthusiasts, right? Like, who are those people? Right.
People who like go to air shows
Yeah.
that just enjoy flying.
Right, exactly. So person who owns a 172, people who have aircraft down in the hangar here, right? Who just, yeah, like Joe, yeah, like you'd be a local flight instructor doing those kind of things, just to enjoy aviation in general, right? Okay. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? Just fun you just enjoy it and hang out and do that. And it's still, you got to be competent, right? So you got to be a competent pilot to do that, right? Okay. Then we have commercial aviation, right? So how do we do that? How do we get into commercial aviation, right? Kind of all starts here, but we have aviation colleges, and some of you guys are probably seniors, juniors in high school, right? Okay, so maybe you're looking to go to a place like University of North Dakota, Dubuque, Embry-Riddle, those kind of places where you just focus mainly on aviation or any kind of subjects. Instead of majoring in something like business, you'd major in like airfield management or something of that sort, right? Okay, you're going to come out with a degree and probably a lot of ratings, right? Your instrument, maybe your CFI, CFII, your commercial, those kind of things, and get you ready for the airlines or going and maybe flying for like net jets or somebody private who owns a nice airplane, right? Who needs a pilot to fly it. So really nice to fly a G700, right? Pretty nice airplane. All right. And then how else do we get into it? Like for me, I went from military to civilian. Okay, so there's guys with a ton of experience in the military who they can just instantly jump into the commercial sector, right? That's pretty highly desirable, right? And then there's sponsored programs. We have an American, we have a cadet program. United has something called the Aviate Academy. So what do? Okay, this is for people who maybe don't have the money and the funding, but have a really strong interest that can apply. And then, for instance, United's going to pay for a lot of that stuff in your school, all right? And then at the end, you're going to owe them a little bit of a debt. It's a debt you want to pay anyway, right? Because you want to go fly for them, right? So, for instance, I have a friend from the Dells, a kid, who I've been talking to all through his high school career. And then when he went to college, he went to University of Dubuque. I think there's an aviation school down there, right? I forget the exact name of it. All right. Bottom line though is halfway through Envoy, who's one of American Airlines, regional airlines. They fly the 175, Embraer 175, right? Okay. They paid for half of his college education as long as he gave them, I think, 3 years at least. Okay. He had to earn that, right? He had to get certain grades. He had to do certain things. He had to be good at what he did. So there's those programs out there, and we'll talk a little bit more that'll kind of parlay into what the funding and the cost of all this stuff is, because I know it's daunting. Okay, this is not cheap. Okay, so there's that kind of stuff, and all others. Just what you guys are doing here today, right? Like, you can be the person who got their private early, then maybe somewhere in their 20s got their commercial, maybe got their instrument, and then like, you know what? I'm just all the stuff I really like flying. I want a career change, but they've gathered everything just kind of roundabout through different ways and gotten their experience. Maybe flying crop dusters, flying tow planes. Never know, whatever that may be, and built their time just kind of doing that stuff. and then they apply and they get there. Okay. So it's really all avenues. All right. In the military, right? Some of you may or may not want to do this. Anybody in here think they may want to go in the military? Okay. Couple. All right. So military has every type of aircraft that commercial aviation has and more, right? Like commercial aviation doesn't have fighter aircraft. There's not much reason for that, right? All right. Entering methods into the military, right? We can go to college because to fly in the military, with the exception of being a warrant officer in the Army, you won't be able to get in the cockpit behind the controls unless you have a college degree. Okay. So you can go to officer candidate school. That means, hey, I went to college myself, and now I'm just applying to go in, okay, with a college degree. Okay. You have to apply through programs like we hire in Madison, all right, to go directly into a guard unit or a reserve unit, or you go into the active duty, and then in which case you get picked, then you'll go to officer training, go to flight school, and that kind of thing, okay? Or you can go ROTC, our Reserve Officer Training Course, right? So that means you're going to go to college, Madison, Duluth. They have these programs. While you're going to college, you're also going to be an Air Force cadet, okay? Reserves officer, you're going to learn to be an Air Force officer while you're going to college, okay? And then at some point, in the end, they'll have so many flight spots, and then you'll compete for those, okay? And that ebbs and flows with the needs of the Air Force. Like 5-6 years ago, everybody who wanted to be a pilot got a flight slot. Some people that didn't want to be pilots were being encouraged to go, okay? Same thing with Navy, Army, that kind of thing. They do it all the same in that regard, okay? And I should say that the Marine Corps and the Navy also have OCS programs. I don't know about the Army. All right. Or you could go to one of the academies, okay? That's a process, depending on where you are in school, needs to start midway or early part of your high school career, okay? So there's a lot of hoops to jump through, okay? Because they're paying room and board, one of the best educations in the country, fast, okay? And they're paying for it all and sending you through. And then at the end of that, you do the same thing based on physical aptitude and where you are in a school or in your class. At the end of the academy, you're going to get a flight spot. Go ahead.
I know you one of the questions asking.
Sure.
I'm kind of in that process right now, but did you get a nomination from like one of our politicians?
I did. Yeah. And I can talk to you about that offline, maybe afterward. But we can talk to you about the whole process. But that bottom line, that politician, that was a long time ago, no longer in office. Okay.
Gotcha.
So, but it would be the equivalent of Congressman Kyne's district.
Okay.
So, all right. And then off the pilot training, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Army kind of does it all the same. So I'll just kind of talk about the Air Force. What's pilot training like in the military? Okay. So you're going to go off to pilot training depending, okay? First phase of pilot training, something like, you guys know what the T6 Texan 2 is? It's a 2-seat front back turboprop trainer the Air Force Navy uses. Okay. You're gonna go off there and you're gonna do like the initial, hey, here's how to fly the thing, like what you guys are doing now. Then there's going to be instrument training, formation training, those kind of things. So depending on how you do in that and what you want, there's some halfway through pilot training, there's something called track select. Okay. And there's going to be fighters and bombers is one track. Heavies is the other track. Okay. And then helos is the other. And then the C-130 is kind of like its side thing, but that's also kind of heavies, but you have to go to Navy training to do that, to fly the C-130 down at Corpus. Bottom line is, though, is they have a certain amount of slots, right? And how you did in your aptitude, you track select. And then you kind of like class splits up again. Okay. So for me, I went to the fighter track and flew the T-38. Okay. And then when you're done with that, then they have something called assignment night. I went to pilot training for a guard unit out of New York, flew the F-16. So as long as I did well enough to fly fighters, I knew I was going to go back to New York, fly the F-16. So it was kind of anticlimactic for me, but some guys in the active duty component that are there when pilot training with me they might want to fly the A-10, second choice the F-15, third choice F-16, or now it'd be the F-35, F-22, those kind of things, right? And then that's when they find out in front of everybody on a big screen in front of them what they're going to go try to fly. Okay, doesn't mean that's what you're going to fly for your whole career. But usually they spend a lot of money training you on something. Air Force spends initially, when you get done with your initial training, like for me in the F-16, when you get done with that initial training, 2 years into being in the Air Force, they roughly got $6 to $8 million in you. Okay? It's a lot of money, right? All right. When I left the Air Force with that kind of time, I was worth roughly $65 million to the Air Force. And you can't just take somebody who's a lieutenant colonel with all that experience and just go, okay, I'm going to take this new guy and put him in the cockpit, because there's, regardless, I mean, it's not only just the money that you're losing, but it's also the experience. You just can't take all that stuff, because every hour of flight time, you're learning stuff, you're understanding things, the feel on your body, that kind of thing. So, all right. And then I don't know much about the helo track, except for that no matter whether you're in the Navy or the Air Force, if you decide you want to go fly helos for either of those programs, they're going to ship you off to the Army during that portion at Fort Rucker. They're going to have Navy and Air Force instructors at Fort Rucker, but you're going to largely fly in an Army program to learn how to fly helicopters, which is cool too. Air Force Special Ops flies helicopters. All right. What I really want to talk to you guys today about was perspective and learning in aviation, because this is probably one of the most important things I see as different kids come and, or young adults, I should say, come and want to have jobs, or they want to learn to fly. And some of the problems I see with younger people in this, or people that maybe have figured it out, depending on what their upbringing was. So I want to tell you something that I've kind of coined as passion, aptitude, and talent, and we'll break those down. So passion, it's your dream. You're here because you guys, probably not just because, mom and dad said, you guys should go do this, right? Like, it's a lot to learn, right? You guys probably learning, it's probably harder learning this than most of the stuff you're doing in school right now, right? Okay, it's a lot to take in. So what drives that, right? It's because you really want it, right? It's your dream. I just need you to know that, like, whatever it is, don't let anybody discourage you from what it is, okay? Know that it's yours, okay? I'm here to tell you that, like, anybody can do it, all right? I don't care shape, size, color, doesn't matter, okay? How much money you have, okay? So I will tell you that one of the most talented fighter pilots I've ever flown with, probably one of the nicest guys, dorkiest guys I've ever met, great guy. But he's probably the most talented fighter pilot in the Air Force. In fact, he's the squadron commander now, down in Madison, flying the F-35. He just came from Nellis, which is the Air Force equivalent Top Gun, but a lot better. The Navy Top Gun 6 weeks. Air Force Fighter Weapons School was 6 months. And he was the director of operations in that squadron, the F-35 squadron down there. And he wrote basically the entire tactics manual on that. And he's just got a huge brain, nicest guy in the world, and you would never know that he is that guy. Just look at that. All right. Okay, aptitude. What does that mean? It's your brain's processing speed, your hand-eye coordination. What can help this? Preparedness, right? Sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm just not getting it, but you should never go into a situation unprepared, because even if you have the best hand-eye coordination or the best brain processing speed, you're never going to get yourself out of a situation you're not prepared for. There's an old saying that never let your airplane occupy airspace that you have not already mentally occupied. Okay, what kind of things we do this? We're reading the material, so we kind of know what exactly is going to happen. What's the forces acting on the airplane? You understand it. Okay, chair flying. First time you go out and are taxiing on the taxiway, do you want to just be like the instructor telling you what to do? Or have you sat in a chair with the front of the Cessna 172 in front of you and kind of just went through the pacing and said, practice your radio calls. Hey, at this point, I'm going to flip these switches. These are the checklists I'm going to run. And you've done that to mentally prepare yourself, okay? I will tell you, it may seem dorky, but everybody does it, to include the top Air Force fighter pilots, okay? I sat for hours in front of what they call a paper trainer, doing my radio calls, practicing, running checklists, that kind of thing, okay? Chair flying is a real thing, okay? So being prepared, and then receiving feedback, okay? Be the person who's open letting somebody, no matter what your level or what you think the other person has, even if it's like, hey, I've achieved great things, I still listen to anybody else, no matter what their skill level is, because it might be a fair point. Okay, everybody makes mistakes, and no matter what level they're at, okay, it's owning those mistakes, okay, and then processing it, learning from it, moving on. So if you're one of these people that when somebody tells you, you come up with an excuse every time, there may be an excuse, okay, but you need to know that you need to listen and process whatever that excuse is with that feedback you received, okay, and then learn from it and move on. All right. Talent. All right. Everybody thinks that like when you watch Top Gun, you watch Maverick, and they're super talented. That may come into factor a lot of times, but I will tell you in commercial aviation and enthusiast aviation that it's not really something that has to. You don't have to have a lot of talent, like per se, like just naturally talented, fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy. That's not really a thing, right? In fact, at American Airlines, we talk in the safety industry with American that if you have to use talent, everything else is broken down. Okay, the things like standard operating procedures, rules like the FAAs, the FARs, AIM, all those kind of things. All those things, radio calls, air traffic control, all those things are lines of defense, right? If it comes to the point where checklists, those kind of things, if it comes to the point where you have to use your talents to stop a bad situation from happening, like a lot of things have gone wrong. Okay. All right. It's a little bit different story in military aviation in certain regards. Because in the fighter world, we have to do things like fly formation while running sensors and doing all those things. And some people, we just don't have, I would say, going back to the aptitude, not necessarily talent, don't have the aptitude to be able to process things that fast, and maybe I would call it even multitasking, kind of super tasking. Okay. And that's fine. Okay. A very small percentage of the population can do that. And I will tell you that even people that may be on the edge with that, as long as they are prepared and have great attitudes, you can do it. I know plenty of mediocre fighter pilots, even, the lowest guy in the squadron who's got a great attitude and is prepared to get through. Okay. What do you call a fighter pilot who's the bottom of the squadron? Just like what do you call a doctor who graduated last in his class? But doctor, right? Cares, right? All right. So this is like this giant thing in front of you. You guys are like learning ground school for private pilot right now, right? All right. Seems like a lot. Okay. We talked a little bit about maturity. That's kind of like that receiving the feedback. The first time they trust you to go solo in your private pilot, you're going to have the airplane yourself doing pattern only, and you're going to go on your solo cross country. Okay. It's what are we doing when nobody's watching, right? Are we breaking the rules because we want to dive down over mom's house with the 172 and impress everybody? I'll tell you, nobody's impressed. Okay. So, operating inside the rules and regulations. Okay. Then we talked a little bit about it already, owning your mistakes. Okay. Everybody makes mistakes. So yeah. I forgot to put the last notch of flaps in or something, you know what I mean? And the instructor gives you some feedback on it, or maybe I land long and fast and I kind of scared myself with the stopping distance, that kind of thing. Doesn't matter. Hey, don't make an excuse. Own it, learn from it, move on. Okay. I will tell you, you'll get a lot farther by doing that and understanding that you always make mistakes and that you're going to constantly learn. And you go by always trying to say and pawn it off and say something else happened that was the cause of it. There's no room for that in aviation. Okay. There's one thing you learned today. I want you to take that away from this. Okay. All right. And then attitude means like, this is not a competition. Okay. Even when you are in competitive programs like military pilot training, if that's the way you go, you need to know that you're not really in competition. You're in competition with yourself. Okay. And something I didn't realize when I first got there was really helping others helps you. And what I mean by that is like, hey, when your buddy's struggling with a concept, okay, instead of like, all right, he doesn't get it. Oh, I'm going to get farther ahead because they're going to see that he's not going to get it. Then I'm going to get the slot or something, and then he's not. Okay. That's right out. Nobody wants that. Okay. 2 reasons. Okay. It shows that you're a good person. And that's like half of being a pilot, right? Is sympathy and helping others. But also when you teach a concept to somebody else, it reinforces it in your mind that much better. Okay. You learn it much better. Okay. So that is one of those things that I think if young people could understand early on, all right, you're going to get a lot farther ahead that way by helping your buddy. Okay. Then don't look too far ahead. Okay. If you're looking right now, like for you looking, thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to become, this pilot, flying for Delta Airlines as a captain, flying the 747 or the 787 or the A350, over to Japan and back. How do I get there from here? It's just such a long road. Okay. How do we eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. How do we walk up an entire set of stairs? One step at a time. Okay. I will tell you that the program's designed, and you got a long life ahead of you, that you just take it one step at a time and enjoy it all the way. Okay. And then you're going to keep learning. I mean, next week, I said not next week, but the following week, I got to go back to the simulator at American, where I'm going to go back in and probably be humbled again. Okay. By doing, engine out, call them V1 cuts, landing single engine, getting some other situations in the simulator, and then being evaluated by somebody again. It's just a constant process of learning. And the reality is like, you're going to learn things that you're going to forget, and you're going to have to go back and study them again. Okay. You're going to have to constantly stay in your game. It was good to listen to the whole talk on induced drag and stuff like that. It's like, I don't think about that very often in some of the concepts, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things to go back and learn that stuff. I sometimes would, I've got an old private pilot book. It's kind of nice to brush up on some of those things, believe it or not. A couple months ago, I took the Weather for Air Crews book from the Air Force, picked that up, and started going back through concepts again of like frontal boundaries, those kind of things, fog, all those kind of things. Those are all big deals to stay sharp on. Okay. So know that it's a lifelong journey. You don't just it's not like you go off, learn to drive a car, get your driver's license, and you're good. I was just go drive a car. In aviation, you've got to constantly be refining and learning. Okay. It is a skill that is very perishable. All right. All right. We kind of talked about the cadet programs already. How do I fund this, right? Military. You go to the military, they're going to get you all the way through every imaginable rating, with the exception of your airline transport pilot certification. Okay. And you'll have all those ratings, but you'll have all the experience and hours needed when you go to do it. Okay. To make it, just to go through the program. You won't need this, what they call build time. Okay. Students in aviation, right? Somebody was nice enough to sponsor this and give you guys this ground school for nothing, right? How awesome is that? That's a lot. That's a huge burden off somebody's pocketbook, right? Your parents, yours, that kind of thing, depending who's paying for it. All right, and then scholarships. Maybe high school has scholarships, depending on where you're going. Scholarships at college, or even going back to like we talked about, some of the cadet programs. We're going to cover some of your time. So those are kind of the main things I want to talk about. We got about 5 minutes left for questions. Sorry, it took a little longer than I thought. But anybody have any blaring questions right away they want to ask?
So for that part,
yeah.
Like OCS. So what kind of college degrees are you talking?
Doesn't matter. Could be music. One of my best friends is a squadron commander down in Tucson. He's got a music degree, and he literally has a business on the side called School of Rock, where kids learn to play guitars and stuff. A side business, and he's a fighter pilot. So it's need a college degree. Okay.
So just any.
Doesn't matter. I mean, certain things may look better when it comes to competing. If you're going to go compete to get in, certain things may look better. He originally got a music degree when I went through Army ROTC. Okay, he flew Apaches for, I think, 6 years before he came over to the Air Force and got hired with us in Madison and converted over to the Air Force and flew F-16s. But he's got a music degree. So,
I was gonna ask what your favorite aircraft to fly was.
well, F-16. I will tell you, I talked to one of my buddies last weekend. I went down for my buddy's change of command in Milwaukee, who I flew fighters with him forever, and he moved over to Milwaukee. He learned to fly the tanker. Just took over as the wing commander in Milwaukee. And some of my other buddies were there from Madison and flying the F-35 now, flying the F-16. And I said, hey, just give it to me straight. He's like, because nobody wants to give me the straight answer, right? But what he did say is like, if I have to go to war tomorrow, I want to go on the F-35. If I want to just go out and just go fly around and have a great time, I want to go on the F-16. So, because the ergonomics of the F-16 and the thrust to weight ratio and everything else about it, it's like, I always tell people, it's like, for you guys, like, geez, I could date myself, but like, imagine like just your dad or your mom or somebody you know have an old sports car, like a 1980s Corvette or something like that. Okay. Then your mom or your dad might have a new vehicle, right? Like a minivan or something where you get in and the phone automatically connects to the Bluetooth and you name it, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like, that's the old high performance machine. Okay. But it's got like the aftermarket stereo and the aftermarket, you name it, and not necessarily everything talks to each other, because we call that sensor fusion. Okay. You as the person in there's got to be like answering the phone manually, and you've got to be like changing the stations or queuing up that, that song on the radio or whatever it is. Well, in the newer vehicles, right? Like it's a lot of that's taken off your plate, right? You can even hit the adaptive cruise control now, and the thing just keeps the spacing behind another vehicle on the interstate, right? So, but it doesn't necessarily have some of the same flying performance. So, good question. Anything else? Okay.
So with your nomination process, like, did you got selected for the, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of questions did you ask? Did you like?
I can. That was like 26 years ago, 28 years ago. So I'm not going to know the specific questions, but I'll tell you what kind of questions we ask. And they're really not about aviation, right? We want to know what kind of person you are. Okay. We want to know what kind of work ethic you have, what kind of attitude you have. Those are the two most important things: work ethic and attitude, right? So we're going to ask any kind of question related to that. Okay. Hey, what kind of jobs you have in the past? What would your employer say about you? What would your friends say about you? And they're not going to follow up, but we want to know, hey, what other people think of you, right? What are we, give me an example of a time when, okay? Maybe a time you were in a bad situation where you knew somebody, one of your friends did something wrong. How'd you handle it? You know what I mean? Did you talk to your friend? Did you go tell on them? Those are kind of things, right? Like shows level of maturity, work ethic, and attitude we talked about. So those are all the things, right? And then we're going to look at scholastic aptitude as well, right? Like somebody who's got a 4.0 in music and somebody's got a 4.0 in aerospace engineering who's applying are two people completely equal in every other regard. Guess which one we're probably going to pick in training or to go to whatever, right? So probably going to take the person who's got a degree in aerospace engineering, right? So anything else?
Two quick questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were deployed in the Middle East, did you actually have to fly the F-16 all the way over there?
We do. Yep.
So you had to. How long is that flight?
So 2 7 to 8 hour flights. So we'll take off like this out of Madison. We'll meet up with tankers somewhere over Lake Michigan. And then usually like a KC-135, cells of 6 tankers will take 12 usually, which is we have about 18 to 20 jets in the scrap, but we'll take 12 airplanes in that package. And then 2 tankers, 6 on each tanker. We'll refuel probably a couple times until we get to the coast. And then we'll start to go up over like Canada and kind of Greenland, Iceland. And those are obviously for reasons we want to be not over the middle of completely over the middle of the water, but we want to be in a distance where we can divert if we need to, but a place. But then there'll usually be another tanker that comes out and grabs us and they'll drag us. And so people ask, well, how many times do you got to refuel? So we'll just sit there on the tanker. Tanker will be flying, and we'll come take fuel. We always have to try to keep as much fuel as we need for the closest divert. So we may have just come off, pop off, grab gas, and then another 10 minutes later, we got to come back in and top off. Okay, because we're in that spot over the North Atlantic where you've got a good distance, so we got to go to St. John's or Reykjavik or something like that in Iceland. So for whatever reason you can't take gas in the tanker, I got to have as much gas on there right now to be able to make it there.
So you actually fly with the tankers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, we could go faster, but we would burn a lot more gas. So it's just like your car, right? If your mom and dad drove everywhere at 90 miles an hour, the engine's running higher RPM and it's got a lot of induced drag, right, on the airplane, right, or parasitic drag from the mirrors, everything else, and it's got to work harder. So the engine is not as efficient. So people are like, oh, you guys get there, no problem. No, we don't have that kind of legs. Okay, we need tanker gas to get long distances. And we got to go at cruise speeds, right? That's the most efficient. You can go Mach 2, right? Put it literally and put it in afterburner. But when you in afterburner, you get twice the amount of thrust from full throttle, what we call military power scooter, full afterburner. You get twice the amount of thrust, but it costs you 4 times the amount of gas. So dumping raw fuel and spray bars into the exhaust and it's basically a controlled explosion versus, like you guys will learn later, a little bit of a combustion inside a turbine, which runs to the fan to the compressor and the whole thing through a jet engine, which is really the most efficient way. Which is why commercial aviation does not have afterburners on, and that's because it doesn't make any sense, right? It's not fuel efficient. Everything's about money, right? We're trying to make money by getting somebody somewhere because it's a business. So everything's about fuel savings, which is completely different than when I was in the military. Everything was about performance. Any other questions?
Yeah, just the last question is, can I get that picture of you in the F-16?
Yeah, which one?
The one it's got
Oh,
you.
the side profile?
F-16, yeah, side profile. Yeah,
yeah.
That's
Yeah, you bet.
great. I was hoping we might have put a little article on the SIA website.
Sure.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
But-
Yep. Okay. You got a question?
Did you fly the Dragonfly at all?
Dragon. Oh no, so I hadn't, like I said, the Dragonfly. That's the little that was I forget the numerical designation of it, but it's the Air Force Academy uses it for, like, basically. See, you wouldn't need any of this, right? If you got hired to go to the Air Force Academy, the Air Force is always going to take you from step one. Okay, I went to pilot training with people that had already been commercial pilots. They were flying for regional airlines, that kind of thing, and they got hired to go into Air Force pilot training, and they don't care what kind of experience you have. They take you from step one, and with baby steps, we call it, you know what I mean? And that's where you go. So they start out in the Air Force, like, they will pay for you to get your private before you go to Air Force pilot training, so you have awareness of air sense and that kind of thing. And I think at the academy they use the Dragonfly to get guys their private, I think, but I don't even know if I've seen one outside of there. But go ahead.
Oh, what was your what did you study at?
Physics and public administration. So those are two things that actually parlayed pretty well, right? Obviously, physics is important, right? All the things you guys talked about today were really just physics concepts. And then public administration was a big thing for being an officer, right? Because the Air Force and the military in general will tell you that you're an officer first and second. And that's really the way it needs to be. I mean, you're going to spend, on average, I think, good weeks flying in the squadron. I'm going to fly 3 times, but the entire rest of the time I'm at work, I'm doing other things, and I'm being an officer in charge of things, programs, people, those kind of things, right? So, which is a big difference from what commercial aviation is like, right? Commercial aviation is now like, I'm going to go to work on Monday. First time I'm going to meet the person I'm flying with is in the cockpit a half hour before takeoff. And how do we operate like that? Because we all operate under the same standard operating procedures. We're all trained to the exact same verbiages, those kind of things. Okay, we all fly off the same sheet of music. All right, the same standards. And I'm gonna fly with that person for 1 to 5 days, shake hands with them, and then just leave. And that's it. And there's no paperwork, no nothing. All the things I used to have to do extracurricular in the military, somebody else does that for me now, to include my flight planning. Like literally, I have a problem. We have a problem with the dispatch of like, hey, this route or something. We don't try to adjust it ourselves. We call the dispatcher who's running all the numbers on a computer. They change it, plug it back, send it back to us on our computer, and then we use that. Just what it is. It's mainly for efficiency, but it's a whole different, it's a lot more relaxing way of life for me now. So,
Have you used any live missiles? Actual training?
Yeah, I've shot. So this is what they call an AIM-120 or an AMRAAM, and this is AIM-9X. Okay. It's a image seeker, I'll call it. This is a radar missile. So I think 2016, Air Force has a program called WESIP, Weapon System Evaluation Program, constantly studying. The Navy does too. We call it cradle to grave weapons probability of success. Okay, so they want to find out tactically what the probability is of when we have the war game scenarios of like basically that thing hitting the target and making it go away, right? So that may be a failure in the production of the aircraft, of the missile. It may be a failure in the aircraft. It may be a pilot mistake. It might be a maintenance mistake. You name it. It may be some kind of countermeasure from the enemy, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's what they do there. And so they take some of the older missiles, a lot of times in the inventory that have had their time, and they'll put telemetry kits in instead of the warhead, and they'll do all this stuff, and they'll learn from it. Okay, if that thing doesn't meet the parameters of what they call a kill, right? Then it's considered a failure. And they know like the probability of something happening, call it, hey, 90% of the time, this thing's gonna get there with the proper weapons effects. And if it doesn't, then they evaluate, hey, where'd that program fail? Was the missile left in a container on the ramp in the sun and it fried the electronics? Was that a maintenance issue? You know what I mean? Those kind of things. And so I shot one of these at WESIP 2016. That missile right there is $1.5 million. Shot one of those over the Gulf of Mexico at a full-scale drone. So, yeah, and so those opportunities don't come around very often. Dropping bombs is a whole different story, right? So a lot of the bombs don't cost nearly as much as guided missiles. Okay, but I've dropped a lot of those, whether in practice or in real life, over in combat.
Shot any 60s or aircraft?
Any aircraft? No, I don't think there's been an air-to-air kill considered in a decade or better. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm talking U.S. Air Force. So, of course, my son's no more than I.
You're getting schooled. Thank you very
You
much
bet.
for coming in. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
So,
And if anybody has any questions, like you have questions about getting into the service academies, feel free to give me a call or make contact with me, and I can help you out in any way. You know what I mean? Whether that's a simple concept of, hey, what do you think? What is American Airlines asking for what's the best aviation college, or those kind of things. What's a good way? Even if you've heard it here today and you don't think about it, and a year from now you're like, oh, I think that's something I want to do now. Okay, feel free. All right, thanks.
thank you. See you guys next week then.
Everything else in my pocket. Sure. Yeah, if you have different classes in the future, I'm more than happy to do it. So.
Yeah, we'll do it every year.
Yeah.
I told them to do it more often. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
oh
gotta pay
yeah.
the bills.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of things, you know. So much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Could I have your? I'll just write. Yeah, I'm a teacher also, right? But I just.
Yeah.
Where you at?